Okay, guys, today we're here, I guess finishing off our build of our 8X Elite TLR vehicle. My name is Ryan Dunford. I am the product developer for the 8-scale line at this time. I work for Horizon and, of course, TLR. And you can see it's a little darker in here today. I was playing around with some of the lighting to try to think about some of the shots that we want to get. And there's like enough backlight from the camera that it seems to make it better. There's not as much glare going on. So, hey everyone, excited to be finishing this today and kind of show you guys. I noted it as bag J, which is literally putting on 4 wheel nuts, 2 body pins, and that's bag J. But really, I'm going to show you kind of what I go through before it then goes on the track. So we're going to set camber, set toe, we're going to set ride height, we're going to set droop, going to set all of our endpoints on the radio, we're going to set our speed, our expo, all that fun stuff today. So, and talk a little bit about being on the track. So, anyway, we'll wait a couple minutes here. It looks like we're starting to get most everybody on, and we'll get going. So, hey everybody. Hey Lee, how's it going, buddy? Hey Gareth, glad to have you back again, buddy, and glad to see some of the new folks here. Hey Vernon, wow, long time no see, buddy. I hope you're doing well. And we will get going. I have the camera here in a different view. I'll show it on this. I just have it on a little tripod today because I think I'm going to probably have to move it around quite a bit to get the shots that I want to show you guys today. So I want to make sure when this is all said and done, you guys can literally go drop your car on the track and have a good time. So I want to get started. I do have some tires here already mounted up. These are Proline S3 Hole Shots. It's a pretty popular tire here in California. These are already mounted and glued up from the Nitro Challenge. It was a set that I glued up just in case that I never ended up having to run. And so I'm going to use them for this. I'm not really going to go through how to glue video. A bunch of pros I've seen lately have put up how to glue tires videos, and I wouldn't really do much different. I use simple green, full strength, clean off the rubber while it's out, let it dry, put it on, drip glue in there, make sure you get glue all the way around the bead, put a rubber band around, wipe it off, glued tires. Do the other side. I do go back after it's dried and check and go around the edge and make sure that I got everything glued. So Henry, yes, gluing tires sucks, but I prefer gluing tires to using beadlock wheels. I have found after playing around with some of the other either larger scale, 5th scale stuff or some of our scalar crawler stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. So I went ahead and took care of getting that flywheel off yesterday, which was a joy. And but we got it off. We got the engine in, got the gear mesh set, and everything is hooked back up. I do have my Spectrum DX6R here that we will go ahead and use. And I will do my best to show you guys on the screen what I'm playing around with at the time. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the tires on. One thing you got to keep in mind, whenever you're setting ride height, toe, essentially your static settings, you always want to do it with your car ready to go. So you got your battery in the box, you got your body on, tires on, and you kind of go from there. In a nitro car, you do it with, for me, I do it with either what's called a half tank of fuel, or I do it with my fuel up to the seam of the tank. The reason I do that is because as you're running, you go anywhere from having a little bit more fuel to that than to a little less fuel than that. So you're kind of picking that middle spot. So every time I'm setting my ride height, I will have a half tank of fuel in here. and then we go from there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put some tires on the car. Okay, so this is actually bag J. Let me back this up. So sorry, guys, I will be moving the camera around some today. This is a J Concept tire stick for 8 scale. Really helps you keep all your tires together. One thing also with tires, guys, always make sure you use some type of marking so you can keep sets together. You can know which way they are supposed to be rotating, things like that. So, bag J, right? We're going to go ahead and open this up. I don't need the wheels, so I'm going to leave it bagged up. I'm just going to grab the little bag in here, right? And the little bag of this, it literally has 2 body pins, 4 wheel nuts. All right, so we're done. Today's video is over. Have a good day, everyone. But I'm going to grab the wheel nuts out of here. I always mark my tires. I've always marked 1 and 2 as a set. These are the first 2 sets I glued that day. So S31 was the first pair I glued on 218, and this tire rotates in that direction. This was the second pair. And for me, 1s would go on the front, 2s would go on the back. If I glued another set, they would be 3 and 4 for the day, 3s on the front, 4s on the back, and so on. And then I have arrows on there to tell me which way they go. I've always done that. That's just how I am. Some people put LF for left front, LR, RR, all that, because for them that works very well. And that's great. Find something that works for you, but make sure that you're gluing stuff when you glue it up after it's dried, that you are marking them so you can always put them back as a set, guys. Because foams will change over time as you're running. There's so many things that change with them that it's really worth just keeping your tires together. So we're not doing a full race tighten on these. I'm just going to tighten them a little bit, enough that they're not going to change at all. But as you can see here, let me rotate this around. Got a little bit of stink bug or what's known as positive camber going on. Travis, do you ever rotate your 1/8 tires throughout a race day weekend? Pretty rare that I will do that. Sometimes if I'm finding super uneven tire wear from front to rear, I might swap them depending on what's going on, but I will swap front to rear. Right to left, never. Because what happens is if you swap them, the tire wears and it wears at an angle, right? And then what happens is you turn them around because there's a nice fresh edge, and now it's facing this way. And what happens is you have this false sense of a tire that has a lot more grip for like a minute. It rips that edge off, and then you wore out your tire twice as fast at that point, and you have a lot less grip. So I will always go ahead, and at that point, that's the end of that. So normally at this point, I would put a half a tank of fuel in. I'm not going to do that because this is Jim's car, and I don't want to just randomly put fuel in his own car. I'm going to grab his clear body. And again, you would use a painted stickered body for this. I did put an antenna tube, a shorter antenna tube on his car. So the one hole that's not cut out on the body is the antenna, but it is marked because some people don't run it, some people do. And you don't have to put a huge hole or anything, right? Just put a hole in there real quick. Nothing crazy special. And then body goes on the car. And at this point, you would cut out the exhaust, okay? I'm not going to cut this out for him. I want it on here just for the weight right now so that you guys understand that you set it with everything ready to go. Typically, I'm going to kind of do like a really quick rudimentary, get stuff close, right? And then I'm going to set my radio up. And I'll tell you why I'm going to do it this way. So first things first, I'll pull it off. I'm going to go ahead and really quickly just try to, work it in a little bit, drop it on the table. I'm going to get a ride height gauge. Okay. There's a couple different ones out there. This one is every click is a millimeter, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 20 millimeters all the way down, all the way up to 30 millimeters. That one's made by Gia. There's this one here, which I don't really remember who it's made by, but every turn around's a millimeter. But this one's kind of nice because on the back side, you got a 0.5 millimeter. So I could do 21.5 or whatever's going on, but just showing you guys a couple different ride height gauges there. But so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this under here. All right. So I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to bring it down to kind of my eye level. You guys are going to see me move the car around. So normally I'll drop the car, right? And then this goes, I slide it back past the bend. So you want it that you have the bend of the chassis. Right as it goes past that bend, that's where I slide it to. And then I just tap on it and see we're pretty close there. But I'm going to go ahead and turn these a 1/2 turn. And then I would redrop it and put it on there. Right now, the one thing to understand, these tires are brand new. I cleaned this pit board. Usually you'll want to get some dirt on the tires. Make sure they are not grabbing. But that's pretty close for what I'm going to do initially here. Right? And then I'm going to do the same thing in the back. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to drop this. Whoop, you can see it won't even go under there right now. Right? So I'm going to pick it up. And again, I have these lines on the shocks. Right? So I'm going to, okay, 1, 2, 3. And you always want to keep them the same. 1, 2, 3. And it doesn't mean that they always have to face back or to the, or to the front. They can both face to the side or whatnot. But we're going to recheck. Oh, now it goes under there. Nice. So the back of the chassis is flat, guys. So you don't need to worry about getting in front of the curve or behind the curve. You can go right under the gearbox. Now, keep in mind, if you're on a really abrasive track, you're wearing the back of your chassis off. So what you're going to want to do is get a little bit further up till you have actual chassis material like the anodization, and that's where you're going to check your ride height at. But again, that's just quick to get it in place. Then I'd check my front again normally, but this is to get initial settings close, right? So now you guys can see here. Now I can take the body off. Well, I'm going to leave the body on there, but you guys can see. Let me try to show you. Move this back, get that out of the way. All right, we got, now cameras do weird things. So let me try to concentrate on one side here. Okay. Make sure that's straight up and down. All right. So now you can see, let me put this tire straight so you can kind of see it. You can see, here's my can, right? My can's straight up and down right now. If I bring it over here, right, you can see it's actually hitting, right? You always want to set your camber when both tires are pointed in what would be your neutral point. Okay, and I'm going to use just an old school RPM camber gauge. It's dark in here, so I can't really see. And it's at 1.5 degrees, right? I'm going to come in here, right? And you put that against there. get this over to the side, and you guys can see that there's a big old gap at the bottom here. You can see how you can see my finger behind there. So I'm just going to take, and I'm going to turn the turnbuckle forward. Now remember, we put all the lines on the left-hand side. So now I know that forward is shorter, right? And I know the other one looks the same to me, so I'm going to do a couple turns on it too. I'll pick it up. I'll drop it again. And again, this is just initial stuff, guys. All the final settings will come once everything is set. Nope, still needs to go a bunch more. Okay. Pick it up, drop it. Darn computer's in the way here. And there we go. Pretty close. We'll just give it another little smidge. Again, we're going to do the final settings on this later, right? So now, coming over here, we're going to do the same thing on this side, right? Man, it's hard to show that on camera. I get like, oh, there you go. Now you can see it. So see how it's touching the tire on the top here, and there's a gap on the bottom, right? So I'm going to turn this one in a little bit. Okay. Pick it up, drop it, and we're close now. Okay, so now both those are close, and that's what we want. We want close. We're going to do the back too. Okay, and I'll just do that really quick here. I'm going to actually, so the front I did at 1.5. The rear I'm going to do at 1. And the rear is pretty close on that side. And that side's way off. So again, remember when I was initially building this, I just kind of eyed those. Okay, so now my camber's close. So now, if you saw it, remember how it looked. Let me pull the body off now. If you remember how it looked when we first put it out, let me actually get over the top here. Maybe you can see it better. Okay, so now you can see, because I adjusted my camber, it actually looks like there's almost no toe in the car. Now, see how I go over each tire? The camera lens will do weird things, but remember when we were building this, I mentioned to you, anytime you adjust your camber, you always check your toes. So this is, camber is how much your tire's leaning in or out, okay? When the top's leaning in, so if the tire's leaning like this, top towards the car, that's negative camber. Don't know why, that's what we always use. If it's leaning out, that's positive camber. Okay, and then with toe, let me see here. I'll use this other screen here. With toe, now keep in mind, the camera's doing weird things, so I actually have like no toe out right now. So with toe, you got 0 toe. This is toe out, so when the front of the tires are wider apart than the back of the tire, that's toe out. When the front of the tires are closer in, or you look almost pigeon-toed like this, that's called toe in. So on the 8X, we want about a degree. And now, okay, again, keep in mind, your steering links, you always want to be the same length. Whatever you do to one, you do to the other. So if I turn this one a quarter turn, I do that one a quarter turn, right? So I'm going to come in here and get the first one on, and then 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm going to pick it up, drop it again, and now we're going to do just one more on each side because I'm trying to get toe. Now, if I show this to you guys, it's going to look crazy on the camera, right? Looks like a ton of toe. in real life, that's barely towed out. So it's hard to kind of teach this on camera versus real life. But now that I adjusted my tow, I'm going to come back here again and just check my camber. And sure enough, I have a little less camber. So now I got to add a little bit more camber back to both sides. And again, something I get asked, strangely enough, quite often, when you're setting your camber, how should I set it? Should I set it when my car is going straight or with the tire physically pointing straight? Okay, you always set your camber when your car is going straight. So if you have toe out, you would want the tires to point out equal amounts, and that's where you set your camber at. You don't turn it like this so that this tire is now straight and then set the camber and then turn this one straight and set the camber, because that's just not how you do it. It's not consistent that way. So we did that. Now we're going to look at our toe again. And so the first time, it's going to take you a second to kind of get close. So now I need a little bit more toe out. And you always check toe out, so a car will wear a little bit over time, guys. You want to check toe out when you push the car forward, not when you pull it back. So your tires are always pulling forward, right? And I've got like barely any toe out here. So for what it's worth, or you can just push in on the front of your tires. When your tires are pulling forward, they're always going to pull in. So now I've got the basics. I've got about 1 degree of toe out. I've got about 1.5 degrees of camber in the front. I've got about 1 degree of camber in the rear. So strangely enough, I'm going to stop all that now. Now I'm going to set my radio settings. Okay. For this, where did my block? For this, it goes up on a block. Okay. So now that I have everything about where it needs to be, I'm going to go ahead and take care of my radio. Let me turn this around for you guys. So with the Spectrum radio, let me see if I can get this to show you guys. I'm going to have to monkey with this angle. There we go. Wow, I can't believe that's where you can actually read it. Okay, so with the Spectrum radio, DX6R, I come up here to where all my models are. I'm going to click this button, create new model, right? And then I'm going to call this, let's call it Jim's 8X. Great. So it's Jim's 8X. I don't know if you can read that, but that is what it says. Okay, I'm going to hit next. Now the receiver I put in here, what did I put in here? 315. So we're going to just pick that. No external telemetry. This is gas nitro. It doesn't really matter. There's no ROS. Single channel, single steering servo. I don't need any additional features. So this is my setup tree for this 6X, the 6R. So, man, it's hard to see that. I'm sorry, guys. Let's see if I tilt this up a little bit more. Maybe that helps a little bit. But I don't need any other channels. I'm not going to use them. Okay, I now have a new model. Okay, it's going to go right to the binding screen. I can pick between the frame rates here, but we'll bind it at what's called 11 milliseconds. Okay, so now I'm going to open up the receiver box. All right, so I'm just going to pull the top of the receiver box off. Right. For me, with the Spectrum, with this particular receiver, I'm going to put the bind plug in. Eventually, there it goes. Okay, so now, see that? Bind plugs in. See how it's flashing there now? So now I'm going to come back to my radio that you can't read the screen of because our brightnesses contrast each other. Anyway, I'm going to hit begin binding. Okay. Okay. So now with this radio, see how it now says DSMR 11 milliseconds? That's how you know that it bound, right? So, right. So now we have steering, we have throttle. Okay, so you see that? Throttle, except it's reversed. Steering, which is also reversed. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our steering. So I will go in here. I'm going to go back to the dashboard. Pull this blind plug out so I don't forget. I'm going to swing right over here to steering. Okay, for those of you that haven't used a DX6R, your radios will have a similar setup. They might be called the same thing. They might be called different things. But so I'm going to go up here. I reverse the steering servo. Okay, now right is right, left is left. You can see now that I reverse that. If I hold it this way. Man, this is not. See how it's really off? I'm actually going to try pulling the horn off here. Okay, so let me put the receiver box cover back on. From an angle I've never done it before. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this horn off. Just to see if I can get it a little bit more centered. Nope, that's even more the opposite direction. Yeah, that'll have to be okay. So now that I pulled that horn off, guys, I'm going to put a little bit more thread lock on this screw. Because again, things in nitro, they vibrate a lot. So that's why we always make sure anything metal to metal, we're doing this. Okay, so that's on there nice and tight. So the very first thing I'm going to do, and I'll try to show this to you guys. I don't know how well all of this is going to work. It just, so for me, my sub trim is this one, this slider right here. So it's pointing to the right a bunch. So I'm just going to take it. I'm going to drag it a bunch to the left. And I went a little bit too far, but instead of dragging it, I'm just going to kind of hold it over here, steer. And that's a little bit more to the left, a couple ticks. Okay, so now we're pretty centered. Okay, so that's the first thing I always do is I set the sub trim. And you'll notice I did all that. Let me go right back to the dashboard here. I did all that when the trim points are both at 0. So when I'm first setting up a model, I want my trim at 0, which are usually the switches that are out here, right? So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to steering now. So the next thing I'm going to do is set my endpoints. So this one, let me point this down because it's probably going to be, I'll try to show you in 2 screens, okay? So the very first thing I do is I'm going to set the left first. So I steer really slowly, and I see I got maybe a little bit actually too much, right? So I move it back until I can come over here. Hey, sweetie, can you come here, please? Can you hold this camera pointing at that tire? See how on the screen you can see it at that tire? There you go. Thanks. All right. Sorry, guys. Needed help. So I check over here, and I see how it's up against there, but it's just got a ton of pullback. So I give it a couple more clicks. Again, I make sure that it just gets to the end at the end of my steering throw. A couple more clicks. Whoop. There we go. Okay, so you can see, I'm going to show you in this screen. Okay, watch both screens. So as I steer this wheel to the left, right at the end of my throw here, it's getting to the end of the throw there, right? I don't want to get to here and it's at the end of my throw and then I steer that much more. That's just going to fry servos. So now my left endpoint's set. So now I'm going to do the right endpoint. Okay. And this is the same exact process. So kind of clicking it up. And then I fill both sides. It's right to the end. There we go. So now I got my right and left endpoint set, guys. Okay. Thank you, sweetie. All right. So now that that's set, guys, I'm going to talk to you about a setting in your radio that most people don't ever use. I don't really care to see me. I want you to see this. And then I'm probably going to have you see my hand. Let's see how this is going to work. I don't have a clue how this is going to work, but we'll figure it out together, guys. Sorry. All right. So here's the wheel, right? Steering wheel, tires. Okay, and this one's going to seem kind of weird to you guys. So the thing about a radio and a car and everything is the more connected you can feel to it, the better off you're going to be on the track. You're going to be more consistent. So in our radios, if you scroll down a tiny bit, there's our curve for exponential, which a lot of people use. We have what's called steering speed. I don't think you can really read it much, but we have steering speed. What that is for is to adjust the speed of your servo for a couple reasons. The very first reason is that what you're doing here should feel exactly like what's happening here, guys. So if I'm turning the steering wheel and it feels like me here going back and forth is beating here, it means I need a faster servo. If I'm going like this and the servo is so fast that it feels like the tire is beating me to the end on the steering wheel, then I can adjust it on the radio. I can adjust the steering speed. I can turn it down. So I basically will sit here and I will go back and forth. Okay, and it's beating me a tiny, tiny bit. Like with the 6290, it beats me a lot. And it's essentially what I'm doing is I'm setting my brain with what's happening out here and what's happening on the track. So I'm just going to turn the steering rate down a tiny bit, say 5%. Okay, I need to go 96. Okay, there we go. So now the servo and the car and the tires are doing exactly what I'm telling it to do. It's not beating me. A lot of people won't ever play with that. And anytime they change a servo, they'll be like, oh my God, I got to relearn how to drive my car. You should never be relearning how to drive your car. One, these days, servos are so good that you should choose a servo that's plenty fast enough that has the torque that you need, and then you should turn it down to the speed that works for you. The other thing this setting is used for, steering speed, is if you're on a track and there's just, the biggest time I see it is when there's a ton of grip. So when there's a ton of grip, you kind of want to slow down everything because everything's happening so fast in the car. So you can turn your steering speed and your throttle speed down a little bit. But anyway, so that's steering speed. So now this servo is the same speed as me. This one happens to be 96. And every time I put a fresh servo in my car, I always go back and I do this little thing. To do this, though, you turn all your expo off, everything. Everything's flat 0. You go in, you adjust your servo speed. You do it on the throttle as well. But like this one's 96. This is the 6390BL servo from Spectrum. This one's at 96. My 6290 in my 8X, they're at 83. Like that's how much faster the servo feels to me than anything else out here. So that's the next thing I'll do. And then some people know they want to use expo right off the bat. Some people don't. But the next thing I will typically do is if I know there's a minimum expo that I want, let's say for my steering, I know for sure on an 8X, I usually want at least 10. The first thing I'll do is I'll go in here and I'll throw in 10% expo. Okay. So on a DX6R, instead of standard, I'm going to go down to exponential. And then it gives me a right and a left, because on this radio, you can adjust everything separately. And I will go 10, and I will go 10, right? And I know you guys can't really see that, but on a Spectrum radio, positive expo dips the beginning or the initial steering wheel movement. So for expo, what it controls is if I give this first 5%. With no expo, it's giving 5% to the car, as long as I've set everything up right. But what expo does is make it so that no matter what with expo, this is 0 and this is 100. What expo does is make it so that this can be from this first 5% could only give you 2% on the car, but then it's going to start to catch up later on in your throw. So expo will always catch up, guys. So that is one thing to understand about expo. Speed, on the other hand, just slows the whole servo mechanism down. And then you have endpoints, which you could take off throw, usually through steering rate for steering, things like that. So those are the things I will go right into steering, and I will go ahead and check. So I go back, and you can see it looks kind of funky on my monitor because now it's at 7. Well, that's because that's where my sub trim is. The monitor on a Spectrum radio is your output, what's going out. And you can see I've got brake rate and steering rate and everything on here. Okay, so now we're going to do throttle. Okay, so throttle is a little bit different because we haven't set up the linkage yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to throttle. And right now I know that when I pull on the trigger, it's going the wrong way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse it. Okay. So every mechanism I've seen out there, when I pull throttle, it's going to crank on that carburetor barrel. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my throttle, and I'm just going to turn it down a whole bunch. Do the same thing with my brake. My throttle's at 45 and my brake happens to be at 53 right now, guys. And that's just so that I don't ruin my carburetor while I'm trying to set all these settings. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, right? So here's my linkage. You can see how the horn's all offset. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to set this horn to where it says in a given manual. In our case, we set it pretty much in line with the servo. So I need to go this way, which is towards the brake side. So I'm going to just let this thing go a little bit, give it a little bit. Okay, no, a little bit more. Yeah, I went a little bit too much, right? So there's my throttle midpoint. Okay, so that's essentially where my sub trim is, and you should never ever change your sub trim or your trim for throttle. If your engine's not idling properly, that's not your trim. You need to turn your idle up, guys. So now that I set that, what I'm going to do is, you can see in here, there's this big, huge gap between my throttle horn and that collar, that silver collar. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adjust that gap. Okay. Let me see if I can make it so you guys can see this while I do it. Now, you have different people adjust it different. For me, I only like a millimeter in there. Okay. Somebody like a Don, he likes about 2 millimeters in there. He likes to be able to pull on the throttle a little bit before. I'm going to set it at about 1 millimeter. Pull and let go, pull and let go. Let the throttle servo settle. I can't get the wrench in there. Sorry, guys. For me, I tried to turn the light off so you guys could see better. It makes it so that I can't really see. All right. So now my collar's set. Okay, what I'll usually do is I will go back and I'll I'll thread lock that collar. In this case, I'm not going to do that just because I don't need to pull it off again, and it's plenty tight. You don't have to. It's just a good idea to do. So now I'm going to set my throttle. So when I pull on the throttle, right? Sorry, guys, my cat's freaking out in the background here. Man, I suck at moving the camera here. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, there we go. Hey, there's a servo. All right. So you can see if I go in here and I pull, see how the carburetor, that's at full pull, it still moves a bunch. So now I can start to add some of my throttle back. Just a little bit at a time, and pull. A little bit of throttle back. Right? And pull. Oh, too much. Okay. So you want to set the throttle so that when you pull, it's got 1 to 2 millimeters of essentially extra pull. And what that does is make it so that as things are twisting around, it's not over pulling your carburetor. But that gives you full throttle, guys. There are some people that will set the end point so that it gets to the end of the Venturi. I don't disagree with that. For me, that makes it super hard to tune the engine properly because I'm really leaning the top end out almost too much to get full throttle. And I can never get full performance out of an engine that way when it all comes down to it. And then, so that's my throttle. Okay, so now my throttle is set. The pull portion. Now the brakes, okay, I had turned my brakes down a whole bunch. Now there's this little spring in here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my brakes up until I basically just fully collapse that spring. That's pretty tight. Pretty tight. Okay, a little bit too much. Okay. The reason I do that is because I don't want to pull past that. I'm never going to, gosh, if my car ever needs more brakes than that, then I don't have my brake gap set right. So when you end up with a bunch of stuff, see how it rolls nice and free here? That's my neutral point. And as I just start to apply some pressure, all of a sudden my brakes work. Okay, I barely push on the brakes. You can see it moving. Bam, I've already got brakes there, guys. So if your gap is set right, you don't need a ton of throw in your brake before it activates your brakes, so you can actually feel your brakes better. Okay, so now that I have essentially my brakes set, oh gosh, now I messed everything up. Sorry, guys. What I will do next is go into my radio. So now I got all my endpoints set for my brake and my throttle, and it looks kind of weird. My endpoint for my brake's at 62, and my throttle's at 85. And then I will go in and adjust my servo. Okay, I'm going to adjust my servo speed for my throttle. Okay. Okay. Now, my finger, I know my finger is usually slower than I can steer. In this case, the servo speeds are about the same. And then also the other thing you can do now is you can put expo in if you know you like throttle expo. It's pretty rare when I use throttle expo. But to each his own. Some like it, some don't. Yeah, Michael, definitely a cat guy. Sorry. Now I go back here and you'll see steering rate's at 100, brake rate at 100. First thing I'm going to do is go in here, right? Now on a Spectrum, this first switch down here that I have access to, hear the radio beep, that adjusts what is called my brake rate. Okay, so the first thing I do is I turn my brake rate way down. Okay, way down. Now, let me pull this back some so you guys can see the whole car, because I don't know which one you're looking at here. Actually, here, this will be a better view. Perfect. Okay, that'll work. All right, so now I'm going to turn brake rate down until the front brakes feel how I want them to feel. Okay, that's not so. I should put this on this other side. Sorry, guys. All right, so there we go. So now I hold the brake with my left hand. I hold this left tire with that radio hand, and I'm turning this tire. See how it turns pretty good? I like more brake in my front than that. So I'm going to click that lower button, right? Turn my brake rate up a tiny bit more. Okay. Turn it up a tiny bit more. A little bit more. All right. So for me, for my front brake, that's a great place to start. Okay. So now when I've got that much front brake, we're going to check the rear brake. The rear brake's about the same. With the way I built this, it should be about the same, so that worked out. But I like less rear brake than front brake. For me, because I go straight into a corner, while I'm going straight, I hit the brakes really hard, like almost as hard as I can. Let the car slow, and then I let off the brakes and either roll or I start to actually get on the gas and go around a corner. I like less rear brake. It just makes it so the car stops straight. It's kind of like a real car. Your real car, your front brakes are more than your rear. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn down my rear brake a little bit. Okay. So now that's what these two little red levers are for. The one on top here, you can see the little pull goes to the front, and the one on bottom here goes to the back. For me, pretty regularly, I only ever adjust this one that's out here because I use my brake rate to adjust my front, right? Unless my brakes start to get worn, and then I will turn that in a little bit. So now I'm going to turn this in some because that's going to pull this way less, right? So I'm going to just give it a half of a turn, check my front, that's okay. Check my rear, that's a little bit better. I'm going to give it another half of a turn, check my front, check my back, pretty close. I'm going to give it a quarter turn, check my front, check my back. Okay, so now that's what's called brake bias. So the brake bias is the amount that your front tires stop versus your rear tires. That, what I just set, is what I would call about 60-40. So for me pushing on that, about 60% of my force is going to the front, and about 40% of my force is going to the back. I'm going to drive on the track some, let everything break in, and then I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to recheck all of this stuff, guys, except for my endpoints. I'm going to check my brake. I'm going to check my brake rate. But for what it's worth, the brake rate, now that I set my bias, I'm going to go on the track, see how my bias feels, maybe adjust it a tiny bit. Once my bias is okay, it's stopping and going straight, but stopping in the maximum effort it can. I adjust my brake rate every time I do my first 2 laps on a track. So my practice warm-up laps. And I will find the area that I feel I need the most brakes, and I will turn them either up or down until it just stops, but doesn't like skid and get out of control, so that I can jam on the brake. That's how I drive. I never learned really to modulate how much brake. The only way I modulate brakes is by tapping it. I know for a fact somebody like a Dakota Fenn, that kid, he can modulate his brake like he does his throttle. And it's insane to me. I can't. I'm just not built that way. Steven, yes, I did get the flywheel off. You can hear the gear mesh right now. This is the Reds engine. It was fun. Took a really big wrench. But so now my brake bias is set. My brake rate's set. My endpoints are set for my steering. My endpoints are set for my throttle. Most of those settings are pretty good to go. So now I'm going to pull this off the blocks. I'm going to leave the radio on now. Okay, so that I know that my tires are pointing straight. And I'm going to just set this body in place because I didn't cut it out. I don't want to ruin his body because it is his body. And I'm going to come back over here. And now I'm going to go in here, drop it down, check my front ride height. Still good. You basically want it, you don't want to push it in and have it push it up. You want to be able to put it in and just be able to tap on it. And the reason you want to be able to tap on it is because that lets you know that everything's nice and free in here. And then you do the rear. Now, what I will say about cars is, oh, see how that's tighter now? I'm going to give that a half a turn. Half a turn. We're going to recheck it. There we go. So now the rear ride height's checked. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to recheck my front camber. This is at 1.5. And see, now there's a bunch of extra camber. So now, and again, you're getting everything close so that you can set endpoints and stuff like that, guys. Once you set endpoints and everything, then the rest is pretty good. Right? And then the rear. See, now I even need a little bit more on the rear. So the guy I'm building this car for, his name's Jim Conquest. I'm just going to give a little shout out. I just want to, before I forget, I want to thank him, one, for allowing me to build his car for him. I'm sure in reality he wanted to build it, but I put a feeler out there and asked if anybody had a kit I could build, because I didn't want to get one out of stock and build one just to build. I wanted to build one, you know, that was going to go out there into the world. And I just want to tell him thank you. He happens to be the guy that makes this nice, big, huge pit board. It works for 8 scale and 10 scale. Works for my truggy and my buggy. He's actually the guy. It's Imaginate Graphics, but he's actually the guy that makes these shirts for me. Guy that makes my stickers for me. And he's just an all-around good guy. So he's on here. Jim Conquest is his name. Thank you, Jim, again. So I went back. I rechecked everything. Again, that would normally be with a half a tank of fuel. Cham Frog. Yes, I do normally put, I always do all of my ride height with a half a tank of fuel or up to the seam line. That way I can always get it the same. I didn't do it because this is his car. It's a brand new car and that's up to him. But I just wanted to show you guys kind of what I do. And then from there, okay, the next thing I will do is I will pull the tires off. And again, the car is still on. Our battery packs last a long time these days, and I'm not overly worried about it. I'm now going to pull the tires off, and I'm going to show you guys how I set the droop on a car. Now, the one thing about like ride height, guys, when a car's brand spanking new, stuff has to kind of break in and everything. After the first tank of fuel, I will always bring it back in and I will reset the ride height. I will do that because springs break in a little bit. So I will never, ever use a brand new pair of springs when it comes to like, oh, I'm going to throw it out for a qualifier. Let me put a brand new pair of springs on there. They break in. So any springs you ever put on a car, you want them to have at least a run on them. But anyway, so the car's on now. I'm going to grab what should be available soon, which is our droop blocks, and try to figure out how to make this so that you guys can see what I'm going to do. All right, so the blocks basically go in the front and back of the chassis, right? I'm going to pull up, going to kind of give it a tap down. I'm going to take my same ride height gauge, and so what we've been running with universals, we've been using extra droop, and we run 25, 28. And that's the distance between a pit board and the bottom here. Not the hex, the bottom of where the threads are here. And you set all this after all your camber and ride height and everything is set so that the hex is nice and level. When I was running DCVAs like this, we ran at least a millimeter less, usually 2. So we're usually at 30-27. Sorry. So we're at 28, 25 right now with universals, or somewhere between 30-27 and 28-25. So we're 3 millimeters off front to rear pretty regularly. So I'm going to go ahead and set this at the 30-27, which for this ride height, the front would be all the way up. So you can see I can't slide that under there. So now I'm going to get in here and, oops, it would help if I went in the right way. Now this is only taking a lot because it was a brand new build and I had the droop screws all the way up. So you can see with a little bit of turn, it moves a lot out here, guys. Right, so I'm going to kind of just get it really close, and I'm going to do the other side really quick because it's new, right? I want to get the arms closer together before I actually set the droop. So, but the reason I wanted to show you this too, guys, is how much these things move with a little bit of turn. For every like quarter turn you put on this moves like a millimeter. Right, so when you're up there and you're tuning for the track, you want to make sure that you're doing like a quarter turn at a time on this wrench, because a quarter turn is a millimeter. If you're turning this a full turn, you're changing your droop by like 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters at a time, depending on which car it is. So anyway, so now that I got it semi-close, I will come back, give the arms a little love tap here, and then I will slide it right under. And I will check, and I can lift that up a little bit. So I'm going to turn this out a little bit more. Okay, that one's pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to come and do this one. It's about a millimeter of gap in here. And guys, this car is this sensitive. If you don't think a millimeter of stuff matters, right? See how that lifts that up a little bit? Shouldn't really do that. So we're just going to put a little bit more back. So there's the front droop. Okay, so now my front droop is set at 30. I'm going to turn this down 3 clicks to 27. And now I'm going to do my rear droop. Okay. One thing you have to keep in mind is the droop screws will wear into the chassis. and the droop screws themselves will wear some. I check my droop probably every 2 to 3 runs these days. Sometimes I do it before every run if it's a big race. Like when I was at DNC, I checked my droop before every run. I checked my ride height before every run. The reason we do that isn't because we think it's going to change. The reason we do that is because if it does change, we know something's wrong. So something's bent or broken or what's going on. These aren't available from us yet. You can get this one. This is from J&T Bearings. It's 36 millimeter block. There's also a guy that gave out a 3D file for making a 36 millimeter block. All you need is 2 things that are the same height to set the chassis on that keep it flat, and then adjust from there. So if it happens to be a 40 millimeter height, well, you're going to add 4 millimeters to everything. It's just that these blocks make it super convenient because your ride height gauge can pretty much become your droop gauge as well. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is turn the rear end until it's pretty close, right? And again, this is only because it's a new build do I have to give it this many turns. Basically what I'm doing is giving it enough turns to get everything, to get the droop screw touching the chassis. So come down, give it a little tap. Right. Then we're going to check that. Look down here. Use a little bit more. Okay. Give it up. Little tap. And there we go. Right on. And then I will do this side. And there we go. So now I can put these droop blocks out of the way. And these droop blocks actually work for our truggy as well, guys. So when the truggy comes out, the droop blocks will be tall enough for both for what we run, or what we've been running at least to now. Now I can go ahead and I can turn the car off because now everything's set. So again, I set droop, I set ride height, I do all of that with everything on. And that's just so I can always make sure that everything stays nice and straight. And that's almost what I do before every run I go out. And the reason, again, I do that is it's the easiest way for me to tell if something's binding, bent, broken. If my ride height's 27 in the front and 27 in the rear, and it's been that, and I've checked it for the last 15 runs, and on the 16th run, I dropped the car and it's at 27, 24, something's probably wrong in the rear end. So it's a chance for me to go ahead and check that out. But let's go ahead. Are there any other questions here? What do we got here? This tools exist. Not quite yet. The company that's making these for us, these blocks, they decided to divert their resources to making the face shields for folks for the medical field for COVID-19, which I absolutely commend them on. Otherwise, we'd have them in stock already. But he's trying to work them into things so that we have them before we get out of all this mess. The other thing you guys want to do whenever you're setting ride height, make sure you have not only a good flat surface, but one that's level. It seems kind of lame, but the first thing you'll see me do when I set up my pits is set up my pit board. I will literally go, and all of our phones have a level in them these days, right? So I go and I set my pit board down and I put my phone on it and make sure my pit board's level both ways so that when I'm setting my ride height, if my table's crooked, it's going to put more pressure on that end. So my car's not going to work the same or the way I expect it to work out on the track. One thing I did want to go over is when you're getting ready to store your 8-scale car, guys, it's a good idea to unplug the receiver pack if it's going to be more than like a month. We do use a lithium ion pack in our car. Most people do, the DYMB 0510. So it's a lot safer, doesn't draw down as far, whatnot, but it's a good idea to unplug that. You want to pull all the fuel out of your tank. You want to run the fuel out of your engine and put some after run oil into it. And usually you want to pull your shocks off. That way things aren't wanting to twist and turbulate. If you're just gonna, if it's only gonna be a few weeks, make sure your car is up on a stand, the tires are off of it, and then you can leave your shocks on and you'll be perfectly fine. The other thing too that I see a lot is before you start your car, turn it on, make sure everything's moving properly, make sure it's moving the speed you expect, make sure your receiver battery's charged. If you start your engine and you notice that servos are starting to do any jittering or whatnot, please don't go run your car. Usually that means your servo's going bad or your receiver's going bad or switch is going bad. Something's going bad where when you get out there, you're just going to ruin your car. You're going to run into a pole or a fence or another human. God forbid that happens. You might hurt somebody, and it's just not worth it. So track it down, figure out what the bug is. Don't just expect it to magically go away. But yeah, I mean, that's our car. I did put one of Jim's stickers on. I couldn't help it. Jim made these cool stickers. It's Nitro Junkies. Let me grab the sticker sheet here for me. But this was his idea. So just for us folks that like nitro cars. Let's see here. What other questions do we have? Great. For the droop, you don't take the center of the wheel. Our droop, the way we measure it is to the base of this. So I'm not sure how other people measure it or what's going on. I have seen Hot Bodies has a droop gauge that it's got like a little ball in it, but most people use that to just go to the base now too. It was originally designed to go into this kind of the hole in the end of the axle to tell you where droop was at the center line of the axle, but it's just a lot easier to do it on the base. And so even those people that have that do it down here now. And when I say down here, guys, okay, what is that thing? Just so we're clear with each other. Let me try to hold this steady. I don't mean here. I mean here, right? This is where the wheel is at the base. Okay, so that's where you take it to, like that, right? So I think maybe, Gareth, maybe that's what you're asking. Missed what you said about throttle opening endpoint. Pete, you're going to want to go back and watch the video. We kind of go over a lot of stuff with setting up your throttle. I typically set my throttle pull to go all the way out minus about 1 millimeter. So it leaves a little bit of movement in the barrel because then your barrel doesn't get destroyed when stuff twists and turns. Some people pull the barrel just to the edge of the venturi. The problem is most carburetors, the venturi doesn't go all the way to where the barrel is anymore. So you're really not giving yourself full pull. And I've found that when you do that, the carburetor adjustment becomes much more difficult. So if I have it pull all the way out, I can adjust my carburetor easy. It's never affected my fuel mileage. I run the OS engine, the Adam Drake 1, because I haven't gotten a 2 yet. I run it with a 1346 spur with our standard clutch, with our lightened clutch bell or vented clutch bell. And it's got plenty enough snap, but it gives me a little bit more fuel mileage that way. And I get usually between 9.5 and 11 minutes of runtime, so I never really worry about that. But I think that's everything I would do before I go out. And then, of course, all the engine stuff, that's based on whatever engine manufacturer you use. They've got usually tips and tricks in their manual to get you started. Just checking, making sure I got all my notes I went through. And then, like always, guys, if you have any other videos you'd like to see us do, either myself, Frank, one of the other guys, please let me or him know. We communicate a lot together, and I'm happy to do any of the videos for you guys, because if it just makes it easier for everybody to understand and get the information out there, that's all the much better. I think that's everything. I mean, unless you guys can think of anything else that you kind of want to go over. My radio is set up to Jim's car, so technically I can go take this and throw this out on the street or in the backyard here and go get it dirty. But I wouldn't do that to him. I don't think he'd do it to me. So other than that, I'm going to put his wheel nuts back on. And I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to tune in to us here at TLR and Horizon. Hopefully you guys learned something. We love cats. So other than that, I guess that's about it. That's what I have to talk about. And yeah. If we missed anything, if you guys have any questions, find me on Facebook, message me. Be happy to answer them for you. Other than that, we're going to call it a day. And I hope you guys are staying safe and you have a good night.